Welcome, everybody, to the Men's Sexual Mastery Podcast. This is your host, Ian Hawks, and your other host, Ben Timby.
What's up, everybody?
Hey, Ben. Here at Men's Sexual Mastery, we are providing the sexual education, initiation, and trainings that most of us men never actually received. And we believe that this repatterning of our sexuality is integral for us as men to step into our empowerment and our vitality. And we also believe that collectively for us as humans here, this is an incredibly important pillar to address. So we're grateful that you're here. Let's dive into our topic for today. We're going to discuss 3 tools to overcome erectile dysfunction or challenges naturally. So Ben, take us away. Can you tell us what typically causes erectile challenges for us as men?
Yeah, so in our work, we typically see 3 areas where men usually get hung up in their erectile challenges. The first one is with blood flow. The second one is with desensitization. And the third one is with a lack of sexual confidence in the bedroom. A lot of these issues we say are psychosomatic, and that just basically means mind-body connected. It's very much an inside-out job for a lot of guys. It's going to be a lot of mental loops that they're breaking out of to overcome erectile dysfunction. But these are the 3 main areas that we find most guys get hung up in. So in today's podcast, we're going to be giving 3 different tools, 3 different approaches to each of these problems for you. So just to break it down really quick, with the lack of blood flow, what we're going to give you guys are tools to expand your vasculature to increase nitric oxide, which Hawks will be speaking to soon, which is what's actually happening when you're taking Viagra and these other things. You can get that naturally. We're going to be bringing in tools to repattern our arousal pathways as men to overcome desensitization and a lot of the programming we received from porn. And then in the sexual confidence arena, we're going to be bringing in tools to step into that sexual leadership in the bedroom. So with that, I'll pass it to you, Hawks, to take us away with the first major tool we're offering brothers.
Yeah. So this first problem is likely one of the most obvious because it's very physiological. It has to do with blood flow, and we all probably understand that in order to become engorged, have an erection, it requires blood flow. So an inhibiting factor to blood flow is vasoconstriction, which means if our blood vessels are tightened and constricted, we're not getting adequate blood flow into our extremities. We can quite simply repattern our breath and repattern our nervous system and allow our body to actually relax and allow our blood vessels to open and that blood flow then to circulate. And when we pair that with some arousal, it leads to erections. So this can be easier said than done because a lot of the patterns at work constricting our blood flow are deeply rooted. So approaching this from a nervous system and breath awareness and breath repatterning is the best approach that we've found. And that can take some time, and it also has immediate benefits. And we just need to bring our awareness paired with the education and the understanding of what is functional breathing, how can I real-time repattern my breath. That will then lead to a shift in our nervous system state, and all of that leads to our ability to become aroused and engorged. So Ben mentioned nitric oxide to start us off here. Nitric oxide is what prescription medications like Viagra or Cialis are primarily operating on. They're increasing nitric oxide delivery, which allows, and nitric oxide has many different positive benefits to our bodies. One of them being it's a vasodilator, which means it increases the diameter of our blood of our vasculature, which increases blood flow. We actually naturally produce nitric oxide just through breathing through our nose. We are producing nitric oxide in our sinuses when we exhale, and then when we inhale through our nose, we're breathing that nitric oxide into our body. We also produce nitric oxide by vagal toning. So, one of the ways that we can tone our vagus nerve is through humming, vibrating our vocal cords, making sound, which is an uncomfortable thing for many of us as men during sex or arousal. But when we learn to allow ourselves to make some sound, to vibrate our vocal cords, even to just hum, that increases nitric oxide, and it also relaxes our body and helps us to drop into the parasympathetic nervous system state. And it's from the parasympathetic nervous system state, which is our rest and digest, it's our social engagement, a more relaxed state in our body. It's from that place that we experience arousal. So, understanding that breathing functionally through our nose, breathing deep into our body, slowing the breath down, all of these ways, all of these different breath repatterning approaches allow us to relax our system, open up our blood flow, and become available for more engorgement. There's an unconscious pattern for many men when arousal is increasing to actually slow the breath down, to breathe more shallow, and to tighten up and contract the body. So, by bringing our awareness into what's happening physically in our body and then repatterning it by noticing, okay, if I'm contracting my body, my spine, my shoulders, can I open that up? If my breath has become a little bit shallow or a little bit fast, can I slow that down and breathe deeper down into my belly and actually right down into my balls? Because when we breathe down into our pelvic floor, that's also bringing our awareness and it's bringing our energy, and with that, our blood flow and circulation down into the genitals. And as I've been speaking to, bringing that blood flow into our genitals is obviously a crucial part of engorgement. So, repatterning our breath and learning how to regulate our nervous system during states of arousal is one of the biggest like return on investments for our sexual performance and our erectile health. And it also has incredible cascading benefits to all aspects of our life. So I'll leave it at that
Yeah.
for this first physiological approach.
And how great is that it's free? You don't have to get a prescription.
Mhm.
It's repatterning that breath. And just worth mentioning here really quick is there can be a lot of holding patterns that are held in the fascia. I said a couple episodes ago in an interview with James how we talked about the mental knots can often express physically. So this is where a lot of, if you're needing additional support working through these holding patterns in the mind that are often expressed in the body and in your nervous system state, there can be a lot to this, but it is actually a super simple place for us all to start. So with that, I'll move into our second pattern, and that's the desensitization. How did I say it? Desensitization. Is that it?
Yeah, you got it.
Uh, so for many men, our arousal has been largely conditioned by pornography, and I speak firsthand as a guy that got addicted to porn at 10. This is our sexual education for most of us men, and the way that our bodies physiologically learn to relate to sexuality and to sexual energy moving through our body can be programmed at a young age into seeking release immediately, going into these sympathetic clenched states like Hawks was mentioning, the tension, the shallow breathing, and also just the overstimulation, the dopamine overload of looking at porn, for many of us for years and years, thousands and thousands of images. So
And
there can be this. Go
the
ahead.
infinite novelty is a huge piece
Exactly.
of that dopamine system, because we are novelty seeking creatures, and what's available through porn in terms of novelty is supernatural. And so, yeah, that's
Mhm.
just another really big part of that conditioning that leads to desensitization. Because if we're maxing out our dopamine system all the time, then that's ultimately inhibiting our ability to access that same neurochemical in what would be more natural organic situations.
Yeah, exactly. And for many of us, when we're training ourselves looking at a screen to relate to our sexual energy, it's very much in the mind. It's super mental, and we're completely disconnected from our body. So, a lot of this work is reprogramming these neural pathways, these physiological responses to sexuality to get out of the head, to get out of that desensitized, out of the body state, and just into the pure sensations in the body. And one of the biggest tools I'd offer in this realm, if you're just getting started, is just a simple dopamine detox. You know, we say in a lot of this work, what we're doing is slowly detoxing, we're slowly withdrawing from all the high amounts of stimulation we've been accustomed to, whether that's looking at pornographic images or ejaculating all the time. And we're learning to allow that energy to build up. And in the beginning, that can be a little uncomfortable, but over time, you'll notice you'll start to increase your subtle sensations. And this is where we can move into deeper realms of exploration of sexual energy as men and even meet our partners in deeper ways and eventually separate orgasm and ejaculation. So, this is all the path, the very basic tool, you'd say, the dopamine detox of getting over the desensitization. That's what it looks like. So, with that, we'll move into the third tool.
Yeah. So the third tool is there's a lot of there's a strong relationship between the third tool and that second one that you were speaking to, Ben, because the third tool that we wanted to speak to is developing our sexual confidence, and with that, how we show up with a real human partner. And another aspect of that desensitization that comes from chronic porn use is, let's just look at this scenario. Like, if you're looking at porn for arousal 90% of the time or 95% of the time, and then that 5% of the time you're actually with a real woman, there's such a disconnect between that experience of arousal through porn and then the experience of arousal through a real person. It might seem like at first, okay, this is a real person, flesh and bone, that's going to be much more exciting. But if we've conditioned our brain to become aroused through this infinite novelty and looking at a screen where there's not actually a real human connection, it creates a dissonance between the situation that we're in with a real human, which is amazing. Probably most men would objectively prefer to have a real human to human connection. But there's a dissonance there between what we've trained our body to do and then the situation that we find ourselves in. And so practicing as we play is crucial for any sport or any skill that we're learning. And what I mean by that is a way to, you might say, well, how do I practice as I play if I don't have a partner that 95% of the time? We become our own partner, and so approaching lovemaking with ourself, approaching self-pleasure as a human to human connection. We're connecting with ourself and we're in our body rather than dissociating into the mind and externalizing our experience outside of us. So I just wanted to tie that in and then segue into this last tool about developing our sexual confidence. And so another area that we notice men sometimes struggling with erection challenges is, okay, I'm with my partner or I'm with a human, and yet still it's just not really working. I'm not getting fully hard. I don't know what's going on. I want to have sex with her, but my body just isn't responding. And so, we talked about some of the physiological and the mental patterns that will likely influence that situation. And one of the ways that we can create a shift there real time is by creating more polarity in the experience. And so, a common thing that we see with men, especially if you're identify as having some elements of the nice guy syndrome, is there can be a real holding back in our sexual expression, unconscious or perhaps conscious repression of our own sexual desires. And I want to name that this can be coming from a really compassionate place of I want to make sure that my partner feels safe. I want to honor her experience and make it about her. That's all great and really important. But if we're doing that at the expense of our own desire and our own authentic sexual expression, then we're inhibiting some of that polarity that can exist. And that polarity is what creates attraction. And so, quite simply, an easy way to get into more polarity in a real human to human connection as a man, stepping into a leadership role, leaning into your dom a little bit or a lot. With that, as I mentioned, always ensuring that the safety is clearly established and present in that human to human connection, not going overboard, but finding that edge where that aliveness of your masculinity can really come online. And so taking charge, leading the sexual experience, owning and claiming your desires, and allowing yourself to express free of inhibition, that creates a huge amount of charge in the sexual experience, not only for you as a man, but also for your partner as a woman. When we create polarity, both people feel it. And when that polarity is, with proper attunement, and by that I mean you're present enough and tuned in to your partner's experience, her body language, there's a real dance here that creates a huge spark of attraction. And that alone can shift. And I've noticed in my own experience how quickly and how effectively that shifts my own level of arousal and engorgement. Just taking charge as a man and really leading the situation and acting in accordance with our desires. And that can be a process as well of uncovering and discovering what are my desires and what does that look like. And one of the biggest limiting factors to owning our desire is shame. Because if we feel shame around our sexual expression, then there's going to be a natural holding back of that. And obviously, there's a lot that we can do with repatterning our sexual expression when we're on our own, like we were speaking to with porn use, that will allow us to come into a place of alignment and a sense of integrity with our sexual expression that then allows us to show up with another human and trust our own sexual desire rather than holding it back. And one last thing that I didn't speak to around the sexual confidence piece, which is a really big inhibiting factor in this erectile challenge discussion, is the mental loops of performance anxiety. And so we recorded a podcast. It was episode 38, where we did a little bit of a deeper dive into performance anxiety, because that's another really big topic in itself. If you've had past not being able to please or bring pleasure to your woman the way you'd like, or having a repeated pattern of erectile challenges or premature ejaculation, all of these factors are going to create loops in the mind of fear and anxiety. And all of that fear and anxiety also creates the contraction in the body that then inhibits blood flow or leads to the tension and release pattern of premature ejaculation. And so check out episode 38 if you want to learn more about performance anxiety challenges and ways to mitigate that. And yeah, keep tuning in here. Love to receive a rating. If you guys want to give us a little shout out or share the podcast with anyone that you think would benefit from it, we really appreciate your help in us getting this message and this work out there in the world.
All right, brothers. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode on how to naturally overcome erectile challenges. If you're interested in diving deeper, we do have a free school community online. We'll drop that link in the bio where you can access all sorts of material, jump into different discussion threads, and seek support in this space. So again, thank you for tuning in. Send a big love to you and to all the brothers in our training programs, and we'll see you in the next one.